All right, we are here and we are now live. So thank you for joining us here on this live training, which is more specifically what do clients look for when hiring designers. So if you're in the chat, or even if you're watching on the replay, if you can, do me a favor, share this with other people. Why? Because the things I'm going to discuss are very important, not always rarely communicated to everyone, but I'll dive into that. So I just want to make sure everyone gets the opportunity to get as much value as possible. And I'm just happy to see everybody here and happy that you took the time to watch this. Because really, what you're doing is not just watching some live training or another webinar or really just supporting me. What you're really doing is investing in yourself. So let's take some time to look at a few things just before we dive a bit deeper. I will switch this to the presentation and we'll walk through that somewhat. So here we are. You should be able to see the presentation and the different slides that I have available. So just give me a shout. Let me know that you can see all these things and I'll know it's been set up the right way. So just give me a shout and just let me know that you can see that properly. And by the way, on that note, if you're in the chat, feel free to go ahead and make mention of any questions or anything that you have. Though I'll be walking through this, I'm still open and willing to hear anything that it is that you have to say, and we can walk through that and go through that. Let me adjust the slides. I want to make sure you can see everything here on it. Yeah, let me make sure to adjust that so you can see it. I think the window changed slightly. Okay, good. You should be able to see the full thing now as we walk through this presentation. So good. So very good. Hey, I see a few other people coming in here. Thank you. Yes, thank you for giving me updates. I went ahead and fixed it. Yeah, and as I mentioned, feel free to speak in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat as well as walking through the different presentation slides. So either way, just let me know. We can be relaxed here. Make sure you're in a comfortable place. You feel free to talk, interrupt. That's perfectly fine. You're not interrupting me, really. You're just asking me to expand upon something as I go through this. So yeah, that'd be helpful. Well, definitely just to kick things off, I was curious and I did want to know where is everyone from? I did see Jordan is pretty aware because she's been on one of these live trainings before, so she put where she's from. But I am curious if anyone, where are you from? It doesn't matter where do you live. What type of work do you do? I'm just curious just to get to know you and learn a bit more about you. So feel free to type that in the chat as I go through. I guess I'll start with myself. My name is Nathan Alote. I am here based in Houston, Texas, and I've been in Houston pretty much all my life for the most part. And just a little bit more about me, just from background. I am a freelance web designer, and pretty much I'm self-taught. So I had a job at a web hosting company, and I was learning a lot there. But then all of the clients kept asking for websites. They would say, I need a website, I want a website. But the company didn't offer that. So then I said to myself, okay, well, this business is somewhat booming, the business of websites. I mean, we're talking about 10 years ago. So everyone was asking for websites. I said, I probably need to learn how to do this because the demand is not going down by any means. And on that note, I'll tell you a little bit more about who I am and go into all these other places. But yeah, I just want to read a bit of what some people are writing. We have different people from all over. Yeah, definitely Jordan's copywriter. Other people are here as well. So yeah, feel free to keep dropping those in the chat. But more specifically, at least me personally, I worked at a web hosting company after college. So I went to Baylor University. I did engineering, and then I started working at a web hosting company, HostGator. It was there where people started saying, I want a website, I want a website, I want a website. And we helped support them with the server and general support questions, but we didn't do anything else. But I saw the demand that people had for a website and said, man, I really need to look into this. So I then started going to work during the day and learning how to do web design and code and learn the Adobe suite. And I just started learning all that I could about graphic design and web design whenever I wasn't at work. So it pretty much was work during the day, doing things at night. HostGator then later, they were bought out, and they, in a sense, had a partnership with Bluehost. So I did some stuff for Bluehost as well as HostGator at the same time. But also, I mentioned I was learning things at night. So it was during this time I started InFocus Media, which is my web design studio that I started, and I started working with clients and doing their work. Now, I will admit, during that time, I learned a lot about the technical side of things. I had an engineering background from my undergrad. I learned a lot during my day job and about web hosting and websites, and I was teaching myself, but I didn't know a lot about business, right? So I realized that I really needed to learn a little bit more about business when I had one of my clients was Envato. They needed help with the website redesign, and I was like, "Oh, I can help you with that for sure." Now, Envato was pretty big, and they offer website assets as well as creative assets to different creators. They're like Creative Market. They give different things out like that, and I did that work for them, and they said you have access to all of our tutorials. I was like, "Oh, great! Well, thanks. That's a nice bonus." And I started reading those tutorials about design and business and marketing, and I said, "Well, even though I have my own business, there's a lot I still need to learn." So I enrolled in an MBA program at the University of Houston, and I did marketing and marketing analysis. At first, I was going to do something else, but I started doing very well in marketing. So then I paired the marketing they had with the marketing I was learning. I did digital marketing and did that. But I was learning so much. Though I had my business website, InFocus Media, I said, well, I probably need to, in a sense, capture, or I need to spread a little bit more about what it is that I'm learning. So then I started nathanalote.com, and I pretty much started teaching everything I was learning. So I had my professional website where I did web design and worked with clients, and then I had nathanalote.com where I pretty much was teaching everything I know about business and design. So that brings us closer to where we are today, which is I have a podcast called the Freelance Jumpstart Podcast, and you can listen to that. Just a quick preview of what that looks like. If you go to my website, Freelance Jumpstart TV is the name of the podcast. It's videos on YouTube, but there's an audio podcast as well. So either way, either one you want to listen to. I've been doing this, I think a little over about 3.5 years. So sharing everything I learned about business and design. So you can feel free to check out those resources. But I just wanted to introduce myself. I didn't want to just hop in without telling you a little bit of who I am if you're not familiar. And as I mentioned, feel free to let me know who you are, introduce yourself, even if you're watching on the replay, because I'll go back and look at that. Hey, how you doing? I see we got Chattanooga, Tennessee in the house, so good to meet you as well. So definitely. But yeah, just continuing with where we're going. Let me go back to the slides. Just with where you are right now, let's take some time to focus. So if you can, try to minimize distractions. I don't mind if you're doing other things. I mean, that's perfectly fine. But if you really want to get maximum value, you would have to minimize some other distractions. And like I mentioned, I'm going to get to the point today. I don't want to take too much of your time, so I'll be very direct. So just try to minimize distraction, get the value that you can here. Also, training will last about an hour. The Q&A, I'll stay around for as long as people have questions, but I don't want to take too much time, as I already mentioned. I'll be very direct this time. And besides that point, also, there is questions. I think you all have done a great job of already doing this. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I will look at those questions and answer anything that I need to as it pertains to what those questions are. And yeah, that's my goal there. And besides that, video replay will be available. So again, if you missed anything or you're watching right now, you have to leave, or I don't know, maybe you have a family member calling you in the background or something, that's perfectly fine. You can come back to this later and watch it at a later time and get the value there. Well, really quick, the one thing that I did not say about my story is I learned a lot, and I was growing my business, and I even went to get deeper into business school. But I realized at the time when I was in business school, how should I say this? I wasn't maximizing my potential. I also realized that the type of clients I was getting wasn't the exact type of clients that I thought were a complement to the skills I was able to provide. So, what do I mean by that? So, just to give you an example, and I've talked about this before, but I mention this every time because I think it's something that needs to be top of mind for designers. This is a quick look at target markets. And right now, we're just looking at pricing, what people are willing to pay. Okay. And so let's say price is on the y axis and willingness to pay is on the x axis, horizontal. And it creates different segments. So the segment I wanted to be a part of was the luxury or premium segment, right? Where people don't mind paying for anything as long as it's good. But what happened to me is I was on the lower end. I was at give me a hookup or give me a deal. So those are the type of people who were coming to me. Now, again, the problem that created was people, in a sense, wanted me to produce top quality work for a low price. So they wanted the top quality they can get for a lower price. And that's not really sustainable for what I was trying to do. And I noticed that it took me 10, 11, 12, 22 clients to get to my yearly revenue goals. That's a lot of clients and projects to juggle. And if you do the math, really, I had to try to get about 2 clients a month. So that's me trying to work on something and trying to advertise my business and trying to, land and qualify clients. It was too much. So I asked myself, how could I jump to luxury premium? How can I get to the point where I have clients and I don't have so many? A lot of that centered around changing my price. But that wasn't the only thing. Changing my price was one aspect of it, but another aspect of it is I really had to reposition myself or change many things about how I was handling myself and presenting myself in my business. In other words, if you want high value clients, everything you have to do has to look and be high value. Even my processes, even how I spoke with people, even what I tolerated as a professional. Yes, it's good to be accommodating to clients, but at the same time, there's certain things professionals just don't do, right? Because they have certain rules and principles they put into place. So I realized myself that I wasn't acting like luxury premium. And just to give you an example, let's take Apple. Apple is viewed as a luxury and premium brand. People buy their watches, their phones, their computers. And I'll say this, Apple doesn't really discount. Very rarely. They discount for students and they have other discounts as well. But those discounts are very small. So they don't really discount their products. And they stand firm on that and they don't really change on that. That being said, again, because that's the case, they know who they are. But myself, sometimes I would discount. Sometimes I would do other things. I would just, the client soul was right. That wasn't the correct thing for me to do. So if you're out there and you're wondering how to get better clients and you're not sure about the ones you're getting, a lot of it has to do with how you're presenting yourself. And I'll talk about that. So going from there, I just have a question, which is, are you aware of the gap? Are you aware of the gap? Quick drink. So are you aware of what the gap is? And again, I've talked about this. You're a designer, but there's other agencies out there that exist, and I would say they're getting the top clients. They're getting the top talent to work with and pair with, and their portfolio looks great. And they're working with the Nikes and Amazons and Apples of the world. And you're wondering, how can I work with them? What can I do? How can I even get close to what it is that they're doing? You might be thinking that. So there is a gap. Now, you can try to jump and make the gap yourself and get to the other side, or maybe jump over and start working with an agency. That's what some people do, or some people just try to figure it out, but this is a big gap here, and some people fall and they don't make it, and they don't know why. So I've talked about this in the past, but I'll run through this quickly because it's important. Some of you have seen this, some of you have not, but more specifically, everything I have listed here is the creative process. So whenever you're doing something for a client, you should have a process. Some people probably are thinking, I don't even have a process. Well, this is what a creative process is, and if you don't have one, pay attention. You can learn from this. So really, when you have any project, you need to plan and go through the strategy. Then you need to create something. We're in the green area. Then after you create it, you need to execute on it. We're on the navy blue area. Then once it's executed or launched or placed into the market, then you need to analyze and see what you can do to improve. Now we're in the lighter blue or cerulean blue area. So that's the creative process. Plan, create and develop, execute, launch, and then analyze your results and start again. How does the analyze thing that you did affect your strategy, and you move forward that way? That's the creative process. Now, I've noticed consultants live on the left-hand side. They do planning, strategy, they analyze, they make things better. That's what consultants do. And a lot of what they offer has to do with that. They might not do the work themselves, but they're laying out what the company needs to do strategically, and that's highly important. On the other end, you have freelancers, or a lot of freelance designers live. They're creating something or putting something in market. Maybe they're making a website, maybe they're making a flyer, maybe they're making a logo, maybe they're doing some type of branding, and then they're handing it to the client. Or perhaps they're taking what's created and putting that into the market. They're taking what's created, and maybe you made some type of flyer and then you change it into an Instagram post or a Facebook ad, and then you put it in Facebook and you're executing and putting it in the market somehow. So what you created is placed directly in a marketing or advertising campaign. That's where freelancers live. Now, I've noticed agencies do everything. They offer planning and strategy. They partner with different people to get things created. They execute. They come back to them and tell them how to improve, and then they continue. So because agencies do everything, they have the advantage of getting paid from the client on every step, charging the client for strategy, charging the client for getting things created, charging the client for executing it and putting it or managing their marketing campaigns online, Facebook, pay-per-click advertising, whatever, and then analyzing things and getting back to them with an answer on what the analysis is telling them to do next. So agencies have an advantage of offering, in a sense, 4 main areas in which they can help someone. Now, a lot of times when it comes to designers, or we're talking about bridging the gap, a lot of times when it comes to designers, we offer one thing. I can design a logo for you, one thing, right? And the client still might need help in the other 4 areas, but we're only offering one thing. So the question I would ask to anyone, and again, we're talking about the gap, but the question I would ask to anyone is, where do you fit on this chart? And be honest with yourself, because if we're talking about me, I fit on the creating and executing part. A lot of times I'd make a website for somebody, I'd launch it. Sometimes I'd manage it for someone. Sometimes I would, do maintenance for them or keep it up to date, or do, publish things for them. Sometimes I do that. But really, a lot of what I did had to deal with creating and executing. So I was on one side. So the higher level thinking, the higher level strategy, the analyzing to make things better, I never really lived over there. But when I started transitioning or repositioning myself, and I started offering strategy, and I started analyzing things to say, you came to me and you said you wanted a website. Let me see your Google Analytics first, because we need to determine if this will really solve your problem. When I started speaking like that, working with clients like that, started being able to charge more, started moving higher, I guess you could say, to a higher segment towards luxury and premium, where we're getting our thoughts and strategy down first to determine and verify it's the right direction to go in, and then we're moving forward so we're not wasting any effort. So again, everything that you saw, if you want a better breakdown of what that is, I have an episode of my podcast, freelancejumpstart.tv/59. I go deeper into that, and that's just something that's available. It's online. It's free. I would say listen to it. It's funny. Somebody just listened to this the other day, and they were like, wow, I wish I had this years ago. This is perfect. So they just told me that on YouTube the other day. So I would say check that out. That's available for you for free. So what we want to do is bridge the gap. We don't want to jump, right? Because you might make it, you might not. Or like I mentioned, if you do want to work for an agency, feel free to go jump and work for the agency. There's nothing wrong with that. Agencies are good. But again, we do want to bridge the gap, and there's a certain way to go about doing that. Now, we're able to bridge this gap because of something that Chris Do said. Chris Do is the founder of an agency called Blind, and he has a design education YouTube channel and resource called The Future. But I like how he, I guess, breaks down how simple agencies are. He said agencies sell the talent of their designers. So what he's speaking to is an agency is only as good as the designers they're able to work with. If you had a team full of 12 great designers that work in an agency and then they all quit, what does the agency have to offer? Nothing. All they have to offer is maybe relationships. Maybe they can find new designers. Maybe they've already created a network. So they have a network, but if all the designers left, they can't produce anything, right? So they can only give advice or consulting, or that grid we talked about where there's 4 quadrants. They can only offer the other 2. They'd have to change their whole business model if they didn't have designers, right? So designers are more important than you think, and you as a designer, you are more important than you're probably giving yourself credit for. So that being said, think about yourself in respect of an agency. I'd ask, are you satisfied with the type of clients that contact you? And this is the question that I had to face when I mentioned I had to work with like 22 clients just to reach some type of income goal. Am I satisfied with the type of clients that contact you? Do they contact you and trust you as a professional, or are they asking for a hookup? Are they asking for a discount? You really have to ask yourself that. Now, a lot of times I hear people online complaining about clients, talking about clients, saying, hey, I don't, clients, oh, I wish, there's jokes. There's a website, clients from hell and different things like that. So there's jokes about it. But really, it's never the client's fault. I would say it's you as a professional, it's your fault, because it's not about who's at fault, right? We're just really trying to dive into and look at what's really going on. And that being said, the answer to the question of are you satisfied with the type of clients you're getting is found in knowing the difference between an amateur and a professional. So maybe you're accidentally projecting things like you're an amateur when you don't really mean to. Like I said, I was a self-taught web designer. I learned pretty much everything online. I did purchase a few courses, but I learned everything online. And then when I had a client, Envato, they're the ones who said, hey, you can check out some of our tutorials if you want. And reading their tutorials where I realized I have the creative side down. I don't have the business side down. I do need to learn more, right? And that being said, let's look at the definition between an amateur and a professional, right? An amateur is a person who engages in a pursuit, especially a sport, on an unpaid rather than professional basis. Or you can say it's something that's done in an incompetent or inept way. In other words, when you see something that's amateur, you know it, or you see something that just looks elementary, it doesn't look refined, it doesn't look like someone took the time or invested into really creating something that could be done professionally, right? And like I said, if you're an amateur, it infers you're doing unpaid work, or you're doing something because you like it. You're doing something because it's a hobby for you. It's not really something you're taking serious. It's just a hobby that you do on the side, right? You're not really taking it professional. And if you're not taking it professional, people start to think in their mind, this is amateur work. It's not worth more money. But again, in the context of what we're talking about, agency sells the talent of designers. I've seen agencies that don't produce work that looks professional, but because they package it as an agency, they're still able to charge more. So when it comes to professional, let's look at a definition for that. Professional is or means you're engaged in a specified activity as one main paid occupation rather than as a pastime. So it's not a hobby, it's your main focus. Second definition, a person competent or skilled in a particular activity. So question, notice the difference? Now, the main difference is literally some words. I already have them highlighted blue: paid versus unpaid, and then competent versus incompetent. So, if you are a designer who has ever been paid for anything, you're a professional. Now, you might be treating your business as a side business or a hobby or a pastime. That's okay. I mentioned earlier I had a day job and I did this at night. But regardless of that fact, I would say you're a professional. It's time to start acting like one. You're a professional. You've been paid, right? And though it might not be your main use of time, you need to start treating your design business like it is your main thing or like it is very important. Let's be honest. You have a day job. There's some things that if you did at work, it would be unacceptable and you'd eventually get fired. But when it comes to running our own businesses or projecting ourselves as designers, sometimes, well, I'll talk about me. I won't talk about anyone out there. Sometimes I was a little lazy. I was a little lazy. I didn't do things always professionally. I would take my time and not really get back to people in a timely manner. Things like that. Things that weren't really the best. And to be honest, I wasn't acting as a professional. I just wasn't. And I had to be honest with myself. So when I say notice the difference, that's what I mean. Well, now I'm about to go deep into 10 quick things that I believe you can pay attention to because it's what people look for. And where this came from was I went to different agencies. I visited with them. By the way, it is very, in my opinion, easy, or I would say easier than you think, to meet with an agency. You know, I went to LA one time. I emailed about 3 different agencies. I said, hey, I'm a designer. I'm looking to start my own agency or work with agencies more often. Do you mind if I drop by and just see how you have things set up? And every time I said that, they said yes. And also I showed up and they literally just showed me everything behind the scenes. They showed me everything behind the scenes and they showed me how things work. And I was a bit shocked at how quick or willing they were to talk to me about those things. So that just somewhat surprised me, really. And I was like, wow, willing, tongue tied. They're really willing to tell me pretty much anything about their business. And I was just taken back by that. You know, that was a bit of a shock. So really quick, going in the chat. Any questions so far? Now, I may answer your questions in future, slides that I'm about to present. But I just wanted to ask. So I went in the chat and just asked, how are things going so far? Because we're about to get into what those 10 things are, and I'll go into them. But yeah, I just was curious as to know if anybody had anything or any questions just before we dive into those things. If not, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But regardless, I was just curious on if anybody just had anything. So that's perfectly fine. All right, great. Well, I don't see anything yet, but I'll be on the lookout for that. So yeah, let's dive into what those things are. And all of these came from different people I spoke with who work at agencies or different clients that I've worked with or spoken with and talked to them about these things. So yeah, getting back to this area, let me go back to the slides. So here's the first tip. First impressions are of first importance. First impressions are of first importance. What do I mean and how do I mean when I say this? When I'm first impressions is really what people are going to see. Now, anyone who's a hiring manager at an agency or anybody who's a client that is looking to hire someone, they don't have a lot of time. They don't want to wade through 30 designers, 40 designers. They really want to get to the point where they can work with you and know that you're good. So they're going to scan through different things. They're going to scan, especially if they're looking at your portfolio, they're going to scan very quickly before they make a decision on looking deeper or seeing if you can handle the work that they have in mind or have envisioned for you to do. What people normally do is they say, I need a graphic designer or graphic designer or illustrator that can make logos. They might get a referral. Somebody tell them to go to a certain place, or they search online, whatever it might be, and they look, and they're just trying to see very quickly, are you consistently showing that you are a good logo designer? Matthew Encina, who works at Blind, the same agency I mentioned earlier with Chris Do. He works at Blind, and Matthew Encina, something that he said was, I make a decision about a designer in the first 10 to 15 seconds of viewing their portfolio. Wow. Now, I would think, Matthew would, give people a little bit more time. I would think, hey, well, you've been a freelancer before. You know how it is. Maybe somebody's really more talented. They just maybe made a mistake or something, or maybe they're just not showing their best work first. Not for Matthew. I know Matthew. I've talked to him multiple times. He's fairly busy. I mean, he's working at an agency. He's training and teaching other designers. He's making content on a weekly basis. Matthew has a family as well. Also, he wants to have fun too. So he can't spend all day at work, but he has to finish projects. But he doesn't have much time, 10 to 15 seconds. That being said, a quick note about that. Since this is an example of somebody's portfolio I found on Behance named Tobias. I thought he had a great portfolio. I'm not sure how he's arranged things, but he has skill. And Behance, which is a platform for you to display your creative work, is the world's largest place to display your creative work. And he's won many awards on the website. I'm not sure how he has things arranged, but your best work needs to be on the upper left-hand corner of your portfolio, or if you have a website, it needs to go first. Whatever is your best work, what you're most proud of, or shows your most versatility, or you go deep on a skill, that needs to be shown first. Now, I didn't get a chance to reach out to Tobias. I actually messaged him, so we'll see. But I'm not sure what he feels is his best. But regardless, it needs to be shown first. Because if someone's really looking in 10 and 15 seconds, you all tell me. If you looked at the screen for 10 to 15 seconds, does Tobias look competent to do work? My opinion, yes. Because these first 6 things I see, they seem to meet a certain standard. And he seems to be good at it. Now, I haven't even clicked into any of his projects yet. But that being said, regardless, from what I see, looks pretty good. And I believe he can do and handle the work. So that being said, Tobias, great job. But again, for anybody else out there, I'm just adjusting my mic. For anybody else out there, your best work has to go first, because your first impression pretty much is the most important. Your first impression is the most important. Moving on to tip 2, provide context. Now, this is something that not everyone does, or not everyone knows how to do very well, but I'm going to help you out very quickly on how to do this. When I say provide context, and this is honestly the most important thing I've seen, let someone know when they're viewing your website or your portfolio, let them know what it is they're looking at. Let them know what it is you did on a certain project. So if you have a case study or if you're showing a portfolio project, they need to know the context of it. Now, here's a quick example. Now, this example came from Farm Design, which is also out of LA. And when they put different things in their portfolio projects, they always have an opening statement or something that somewhat encapsulate or summarizes very quickly. Sometimes 2 sentences, that's all they have. 1 to 2 sentences. But it sums up very quickly what the company they worked with does, and sometimes their work that they did for them very quickly. And that just provides context where they say, oh, okay, because you don't want to throw a lot of nice pictures or nice images on your portfolio and assume that the person looking at it is going to discern or decipher what it is you're trying to say. 10 to 15 seconds sometimes is all you have. They're not going to try to infer all of that in 10 to 15 seconds. You're making them work too hard. Make it easy by just saying very quickly, this is a project I did. This is the type of work it does. I do on a regular basis, and this is how I help them. But to give you a more quick layout on what I mean, here's 3 questions you can ask yourself. Create what I call a defining statement. So answer 3 questions. Who is the company that you worked for or the client you worked for? If you're showing your portfolio project or on your website, what does the company or the client do? And then lastly, what was your role in the project? And I would even add, how did you produce results? Right? I would say those 3 things. Answer these 3 questions and you will provide context for your case study or your portfolio project that you're showing to a client or an agency if they're looking to hire you, because that's the first question they're going to ask. Do you have a portfolio? And then when they go to your portfolio, the first thing they'll be looking for besides just overall impression is context. And if you provide it first and up front, the scene is set and they're ready to move forward. The third tip I will get to is your process. So what is the process that you've had set up? Now, I've talked about this before in different videos and on emails, different things that I've written. But just to be clear and direct, what is your process? Everybody's process is different. Everybody's process is not the same. But regardless, they need to be, meaning the person going to hire you, the client, the agency, they need to be aware of what your process is. Now, this is very important. I've been in meetings where a client comes in, or I should even say an agency or a designer comes in and they do an awesome presentation. And then they leave and people are debating. If they don't know what your process is, they get a bit nervous. Because everyone has a process, right? But I like how Sean McCabe says it. He says it's not a process unless it's written down. So you really need to take the time to write down what your process is so people are aware, because this tells them what you're able to do, but also the next step of the process. Let's go back. If you don't have a process, this is the creative process, which I believe would be helpful if you adapted. Plan, create, execute, analyze, strategy, develop something new, execute, analyze and optimize, go back to strategic thinking, move forward, continue. You can tell them this is my strategy. Now you can get more detailed in any 4 of these quadrants and define that more for the client. But again, they need to know what your process is. I like Ben Burns. He also works at Blind in the future. You see a lot of Blind in the future here because when I visited there in LA, they just really challenged me to be more professional. So that's why you see me quoting them quite often. But the funny thing about a lot of these people I'm quoting, they all started like us. They were just regular designers working with clients, making mistakes too, right? And now it's somewhat comical. They're seen as leaders in the industry, not because they're bad or anything, but because they're just like us. So they're not so far from us that we can't adjust to where it is that they are, right? We can do the same things. But I like how Ben Burns said it. He said, the product you sell is not what you create, it's how you create. It's your process. That being said, think about it. Well, I'll talk about myself again. I don't want to talk about anybody out there. I'll talk about myself. Think about it. I'm a designer. I think I'm pretty good, and I've learned quite a bit. There's people who are better illustrators than me. There are people who are better brand identity designers than me. There's people who are better web designers than me. There's people who are better coders than me. I even do video sometimes for clients. There's people who do video way better than me. So the main offering cannot be specifically what I'm creating. It has to be a process that I've shown that is proven to get results, right? So you have to have a process. But there's another side to process. This is also showing your process. So something you can do very quickly as an illustrator, or let's just say you're a brand identity specialist or whatever. Here's a quick picture. And I'll switch back. A quick picture is somebody has created or vectorized, I guess you could say, some hand lettered logo that they've created for a bakery. And You see what the vector looks like on the left hand side, and on the right hand side, you see they literally sketched this out on a piece of paper and scanned it. Small things like this show process, meaning that I didn't write everything that I did, but you can look at it and infer, oh, they did this by hand, and then they made it into a logo. Oh, this is unique because it's by hand, so it's not something that it's not some font they just grabbed. This was by hand, so the client can even infer, if I have this logo, it will be unique because someone drew it, right? So it's not something that's just going to be reused easily. It was customized just for me. So all that was inferred by showing process photos. Now, what comes to mind is, I know there's some people here who are not designers. That doesn't matter. So let's say, and this one pretty much is for Jordan. So let's say you're a writer. What is your process as a writer? Show them some instances of your process that reflect all you do as a writer. So you can talk about how you come up with ideas. You can talk about how you research. So you can say, first I write out an outline, and then I research some things online, and then I read these things that I've researched. And after I read these things that I research, I write a first draft, second draft. So by the time it gets to you, it's the third draft. After that, I put it in a system where I check for over 200 things and grammar and punctuation. So I have some special software that checks all these things. And then I finally get it to you. So when it's in your hand, I've already written this or rewritten this 3 times. And I did research, and I have a list of those references if you ever wanted them, right? That sounds pretty good. What I know some writers do right now is they say, I'm a copywriter, I'm good. And then the client doesn't know how good of a writer you are unless they read something you've written in the past. But they don't know what you're going to apply to their process. So then they hire you, they give you a creative brief or a prompt, and then the next time they hear from you is you're writing something saying, hey, this is what I wrote. Give them some clues as to what your process is, because it'll build confidence that, okay, I see this person's process. Let me envision if I can work with them in their process, maybe can produce results for me, right? But you have to take the time to explain what your process is. Tip 4, think strategically. Think strategically. This is big. When someone's looking at your website or your portfolio and they're thinking about hiring you, they want to know if you can think strategically. And really what they're getting at is, can you talk more about something larger than colors and fonts and things that look good, or video settings, or you say, oh, I have a camera, I have a prime lens, and I'm using a red camera, and it's going to be at 4K. And okay, that's great, but that's great for a video, but what is the strategy? So if you shoot this amazing video, it could even be with an IMAX camera or whatever. If you shoot this amazing video, great. However, what is this video going to do? What is the strategy of this video, of how it will be utilized in the market, and how we evaluate success? You need to be able to talk about those things. Just to give you a clue, and this is pretty good. Let's see. So let's look at it from this perspective. You have mission, vision, strategy, roadmap, and execution. You have those 4 things that you can look at and evaluate. Now, I would say those are certain things you need to take note of. Now, there's a difference between each of these things: mission, vision, strategy, roadmap, and execution. But the main thing I want to call out here is strategy. Strategy is the thing that connects mission and vision to a successful roadmap. So if a company's mission is to, so I'll throw out a company's mission. Let's take, I can't even think of a company that has a good mission, but I'm trying to think of a company specifically that has a mission I want to lean on. But regardless, I'll use a company I worked with in the past. I worked with a client. They were a film festival, but they were a film festival that focused on disabilities, right? And they had a film festival coming up, so the films that they even had featured people with disabilities, right? So it was just a very inspiring event. So their mission was to really show people that they can do anything. And just because they have a disability, it may be a little different for them, but that doesn't mean they can't accomplish great things, right? And they want to see every person with disabilities empowered in the area that they lived in. So great mission, great vision, and I think it's a great cause. But what's the strategy of how you're going to communicate that on your website or your web presence? They didn't have a website. I created one for them, and I had a conversation with them about the imagery needs to show people with disabilities in action. It needs to show people being joyful. It needs to show. So the strategic things that we started talking about was, well, okay, that's one thing, setting the scene. But when people get to this website, what do you want them to do? Oh, we want them to register for a film festival. Okay, great. So the strategy then needs to lead people down registering for the event. So it doesn't matter what we do. The strategy was this needs to contribute to getting a sign up. That's the goal. And I need to be able to speak to whatever it is that I'm creating. It does that in a certain way. So whatever I create, it doesn't matter if it's something large or small, whatever I put to the test of whatever it is I want to do, regardless, I need to make sure that what I'm planning or what I'm creating affects it in a positive manner. That's what I need to do. That's what I need to do. And that sounds easy, but sometimes it's not. So a quick definition of strategy. Strategy represents the set of guiding principles for your road mapping and execution tasks to ensure they align with the mission and vision. That link on the bottom goes to an article on Medium that does a great job of explaining what strategy is. So you need to be able to think strategically as a designer, because most designers don't do that. They think only of aesthetics. And in your case, go beyond that, right? In your case, be strategic, because companies are looking for this. Quick drink. I've been in meetings once again where I thought the designers did a great job presenting, but everyone said, I don't know if I'm confident in their strategy. So then they didn't move forward with them. Tip 5, client work versus self-initiated work. Now, this is important simply because there's nothing wrong with having a portfolio where you have client work, but also work that you've done yourself. A client didn't hire you. You just decided to do a redesign of YouTube, or maybe you decided to take an app that already exists and say, this is my conceptual art of how I would redesign this app, whatever it might be. Nothing wrong with that. But I can definitely say client work that was used in the real world is viewed as more respectful or higher because it was actually placed in the market and tested by the market. It's viewed higher than self-initiated work. It is. It's viewed as more important. Now, a quick thing about that. If you're saying to yourself, I want to double check this link. I went here earlier, but I want to make sure I'm giving you the right link. But again, if you're looking for projects to work on where you don't have any clients yet, but you do want to make sure that what you created gets used in the real world, that is a great site to go to. Catchafire.org, that is the right link. If you go here, basically, you are volunteering your creative skills to help out a company. It can be a nonprofit, it can be for a city, it can be for Change Over Commerce, whatever it might be, but you're volunteering your services. And you, again, put your portfolio out there. They look at your portfolio, they say they want to work with you. You have a real client, you have real client meetings, you work together and you create something for them, and it's for a good cause and it's used in the real world. And also, since you pretty much gave them work at no charge or pro bono, you can ask them to provide things for you for your portfolio or a quote or a statement or anything like that. So if anybody's out there and you don't know where to find client projects, or you're working on client projects, you say, I don't have much to show in my portfolio, you could go here, get a client. Yes, it might be unpaid. More than likely it's unpaid. But you get a portfolio piece that was used in the real world. So there's a mutual benefit there. But again, Client work is seen as more respectable and more important and more real than self initiated work. Tip 6, solve problems. Now, this sounds very basic, but it is not. When I say solve problems, I mean the following. This is a quote from Brennan Dunn. I interviewed him as a part of a resource I made called Freelance Jumpstart. It was a course that accompanies my podcast. So, podcast has a lot of free stuff, but there's an online course that goes deeper. Regardless, he said this: you should eliminate the word freelancer from your vocabulary. Purge this word from your vocabulary. If you are a freelancer, you are a solver of problems. So many times we call ourselves, I'm a freelance graphic designer, I'm a freelance designer, I'm a freelance web designer. We call ourselves freelancers here and there. However, that speaks to our task, or that really speaks to our distinction legally of how we're filing taxes. Freelancer. Really, we're solvers of problems, and we need to know how to solve problems for clients. Again, this goes back to your process. Your process should be all about how you go from start to finish to solve a problem. And again, this gets people off of focusing so much on visual aesthetics of what it is you design and allows them to focus more on the fact that you're able to solve a problem. You just use design to facilitate the solution to that problem. That being said, there's a lot more I can say about solving problems, but I'm being very quick here. So I would say go to this link, respectandvalue.com. Again, this gives you a free course on how to get more respect from your client, and I talk about how to go about solving problems. I talk about how to define yourself as a professional. Then I get into, if you're defining yourself as a professional, you have to know to solve problems, and this is how you go about doing that. If you position yourself that way, you're that much more enticing to someone. For example, let's take designers who make packaging. Now think about it. If someone's coming to you, they want a great design for their product because it's going to sit in a grocery store. But what is more important? Is it more important that the package looks stunning and wins design awards? Or is it more important that the packaging looks good and entices people to buy? A quick story about this, since we're talking about solving problems, and many of you have heard this story before, but I'll say it again. Tropicana orange juice. Tropicana orange juice, they're the ones that have a carton full of orange juice, and it has an orange, and a straw is placed into the orange. They've had that for years. That's what they use. A design agency came along. They said, oh, we're going to redo your packaging. We're going to make it modern. And they redid it. Now, they noticed sales dropped. And the reason sales dropped is because people really thought Tropicana wasn't in the store, because people came looking for the orange with the straw and didn't see it. And when they did, now the packaging did look more modern, but people were like, oh, I don't see it. Well, I guess they don't have it. I'll buy something else. And the company didn't announce they were changing the packaging. They just did it. So it just appeared one day different. And sales went down. And so the company had to revert what they designed back. And then they came up later with like modern packaging that still had the orange with the straw in it. But that's a textbook example of what's the real problem. And you have to ask questions to get to what that real problem is. But the real problem was, we need people to buy our orange juice, not for it to look modernly aesthetic, because there's nothing wrong with the carton. It's a carton. They're just holding orange juice. So again, don't get so caught up in the design elements that you forget to solve the problem of what the person really needs, right? And again, an agency looking to hire you, they want to know you can solve the problem that they have. And when you actually solve it, they'll actually come back to you and ask you initially, okay, what did you use or what did you do that solved my original problem? Really quick. See, that's how, and I have a whole nother video series on this, but that's besides the point. That's how you really present to a client and stop them from giving you endless feedback. You ask the client, what is your problem, or what does failure look like? What does success look like? So you get a definition of success, you get a definition of failure, and you ask them what the problem is, And what would be different about your business if this problem was solved? Ask them that. Once you ask them that and they give you an answer, now you have something that they said would be a great solution to their problem, or you have something where they defined out what the problem is. So now when you design something and you present it to the client, you speak on how it solved their original problem. I had a client who wanted a great website. He was about a rebrand and he wanted a website in bright colors and everything. And I was like, well, why are we doing this? Well, I'm having a grand opening. We just bought a new building and their new building is getting done with the new branding, and we're going to move into the new building and we're going to launch. And I want the website to be ready for launch. So my question was, the real problem is people need to find this building you paid millions of dollars for, not a nice website. So when I designed the website, I was able to talk them through. This is connected to your Google My Business account, so it does have the right address. One of the first things people see on the page is the address. They can click a button to give them directions, right? So I walked them through. The main problem is people finding the location. This is how the website speaks to guiding people towards finding the location. That's solving problems. So the next point, your unique value. Your unique value. Now, this is something that can be difficult to get to, but I'll summarize it like this. I released a video recently called The Riches Are in the Niches, or niches, however you pronounce it. I don't know. But regardless, it's niches. I notice people in Europe or in France will say this niche. Fine. It's fine by me. Either way, you know what I mean by the term. In other words, this video really went into detail about the person pictured there is Helena Price, or she's Helena Hambrick now. But regardless, she's a photographer. And she was able to identify her unique value because she found something that she loved as a hobby, photography. She worked in the industry prior to becoming a photographer where she saw they had a huge need for photos, right? So she had a hobby, something she loved and had interest in. She saw an industry where there was a given need. And then lastly, whatever she was able to provide met that need. So she loved photography. She worked in the tech space and there was a need, but the tech space needs better photos for their product and their services because they were so focused on, we're a tech company, let's highlight our software, and our software is what's going to sell. But she expanded that view and said, no, people want to know the people behind the software that was built. They also want to know how your company works. They want a kind of an inside look to who you are. And we can tell that through photojournalism and photography. And she's been on that key niche for a while, and it's led to massive success for her and the studio she started and even beyond. So again, when we're talking about what your unique value is, which is also a part of this respectandvalue.com course, that's actually the third lesson where I talk about your unique value. So a lot of these things are captured here. But regardless, when we're talking about your unique value, those things have to come together. Those things have to come together. Find something you enjoy doing, but where is the need? And then how does what you enjoy doing meet that need, and is there any overlap? When you combine all those things, it will be great. Tip number 8. This seems like it's not important. It seems like it's not important. It is very important to clients. Check your spelling. I should have actually misspelled this on purpose as a joke, but whatever. That's besides the point. That would have been funny. But again, check your spelling. Whenever something is designed, when in the final design is, if you're a copywriter, if you're a videographer, but you have typography in your video, if you are a graphic designer, you have to spell things the right way. There are tons of portfolios I've seen. Unfortunately, things are misspelled wrong. And I know clients who literally said, this person was perfect, but I saw some misspellings, so I said, forget it. Now, you always hear people on resumes, when you have things that are misspelled, that'll get your resume disqualified. It's a little more heightened in the design space because someone's thinking of, what if I trust you to do a marketing campaign for us and you misspell something and I print 1,000 flyers, and 1,000 flyers have a misspelling. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I've thought the same thing. It's not my job to be an editor. Like they can hire their own editor. Why do I have to check for spelling? As a matter of fact, when I design something and I send it to them, they need to read over it. To be honest, clients are busy. And a lot of clients that I've worked with and even seen in agency life and even at a corporation, they're very busy. So they don't look at that stuff. Sometimes they just trust you did it right. But it can be bad if you have a misspelling and they print something, they're going to come back to you. Or they won't come back to you, and then in both senses of the word, they won't come back to you and tell you, and they won't come back to you at all because you messed up. It's always seen as your fault. And again, that gets back to the difference between a professional and an amateur. Take the time to check your spelling. That being said, maybe you know about this site, maybe you don't. I am not sure. So let me actually show you the slide. I'm not sure if you know about this site, but there's a site called Grammarly.com. I really wish this existed when I was a younger freelancer, but regardless, it is a service that offers to do over 200 checks that Microsoft Word does not check for. So if anything that's written that you're putting on a design, unless it was misspelled on purpose, right? I would say copy it, throw it into Grammarly. Now I know things like Photoshop, they actually have a check spell feature. You should run that before sending anything to a client. But also, copy what you have written out in print or whatever's been designed, put it in Grammarly, see if it can test it, right? Now, Grammarly costs money. They have a free account, but it also has a paid account. The paid account does more checks. But, this is something you can simply add to your process, right? You can even tell someone, right before we get to the execution phase, we run your design through some special software that checks for 200 things that Microsoft Word does not check for. So it definitely is our final check just to make sure it's spelling error free when we place things in the design, and then we put in the design and going forward. And you can even, up your price a bit more to cover the cost of Grammarly, right? Or if you really want to be bold, tell the client you use it. That's perfectly fine. And just to give them some reassurance that you know what you're doing. But I would say for your portfolio, which is the first part, or your portfolio projects, which is the first thing people see before they hire you, make sure it's free of spelling errors. So go check that today. Go check that today. Seriously. Tip number 9, and we're almost done. Tip number 9, we have target audience. Now, I don't know if you've caught how I've spoken during the course of this. I said clients and then I said agencies. I said clients, I said agencies. I've said both. The reason I've been speaking with duality like that is because you need to ask yourself a question. Who is your target audience? Or in other words, what are you going to do as a designer? Are you looking to build up your website and portfolio, and your target audience is to work with clients, meaning that clients come to you and hire you individually? I know that can always be something that's out there. That's always something you want, right? People to come to you. But what I mean here is, are you going to set yourself up like you're your own studio or agency? Even if you're an individual, are you going to work under that mentality where you're getting clients and they're coming to you? So if you wanted to work with Nike, you would be reaching out to Nike to try to work with them or partner with them on a certain project, and they would evaluate your portfolio to see if you're good enough. Or do you want to partner with agencies? Maybe I will really want to work with Nike, but instead of me contacting them myself, I find an agency that has already worked with Nike before, and I partner with them as a designer to accomplish whatever goal Nike has, and I'm a part of the overall project. Now, there's some trade-offs there. Maybe the agency won't let you advertise that you did the work. Maybe you're not seeing people don't know about your business, right? You worked on it, but at the end of the day, the agency gets credit, not you as an individual, right? So maybe there's some apprehension there with that. Who knows? But regardless, in your portfolio, when you set this up, you need to communicate who you're trying to get. My name is Nathan Lote. I am a digital marketing strategist based in Houston, Texas. I'm also, I'm a designer, and my goal is to get clients that serve in the small business market in Houston. If that's what I really want, just say it. If I really did want a Nike, my name is Nathan Lote. I am a digital marketing strategist based here in Houston, Texas. I use web design to facilitate the digital marketing strategy for my clients. I work with Fortune 500 brands such as Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour. And I'm looking to work with more clients in the sports apparel world that want their brand to be just as big as the ones I listed earlier. Now, I probably could do a better job. That was a mouthful, but I can probably concise that down. But regardless, who do you want to target? Do you want to individually get clients yourself, or do you want an agency to hire you? Think about it. Agencies are a little bit more strict when it comes to mistakes because they can't have mistakes. The thing I mentioned about spelling, a client may see a misspelling and say no big deal. An agency may see a misspelling and say absolutely not. We can't hire this person to partner with on this project. They make mistakes. Get them out of here. It's very different. Very different. Getting back to these slides, the reason I asked this question of do you want to become an agency or do you want to partner with an agency is because I believe you can learn. And these are 4 agencies that I like: Landor, Blind, Black Sheep Agency here in Houston, and Pentagram, which is like world renowned. But regardless, this can go twofold. If you're looking to become an agency, go to these sites and mimic them. Whatever they do, because you want their client base. Mimic what they do in terms of how they're presenting their work. Now, if you want to partner with them, look at how they're presenting to their clients and make sure your process or portfolio items show that you, in a sense, already roll up into their process. So you can even message them. My name is Nathan. I'm a designer based in Houston, Texas. I really love and respect the work Blind does. I do digital marketing campaigns, and I'm hoping we can collaborate in the future. Here's my portfolio. Now, the portfolio I send them mimics their process. And many of these companies, if you go to a tab that says work, it shows you their process. But I can show that my process is similar to theirs, and they can think, oh, well, if we were to partner with this person for a client project, they already kind of know our process, and so they just fit right in. So that does matter who your target audience is. Is it clients individually, businesses individually, or agencies? Agencies will be more strict, but just look at what their processes are and mimic it. But a client, again, they will act like you are the agency. So they would expect to see that your website is laid out right, you have a process, and they can follow those things. And when they're looking at your portfolio, you are, tip number 10, telling a story. Telling a story. One mistake I believe I've made in the past, and I've seen fairly frequently online, is people just put up pictures of their work. You have to provide context, which is what we talked about earlier, but don't be afraid to tell a story as well. If there's something unique you did or some design decision that you made that is like none other, go ahead and note that. Go ahead and write that out. And as an example, I have a link here. It is for Behance, is a website I have where I'm pulling up this. But regardless, on this particular page, Smart Wealth was the project. I thought they did a great job explaining everything. First, they talked about the overall project. They went into research, features, user experience, and user interface. And they visually laid things out, but they also had text where they talked about, this is what I did at this step of the process. So someone can see, oh, well, you solved this client's problem and you're telling me a story about how you went doing it. Man, this is great. So they'll definitely appreciate it if you walk them through that process. And this is an example. And I'll include this link in the show notes so you can have it. But this is a great example of telling a story with a project. Telling a story with a project. Right? So again, those were 10 tips. Tell a story. I'm done. But I have one more. I have a bonus tip. This bonus tip is be responsive. No, this does not mean be responsive like a responsive website. Ha ha ha. Ba-doom. No, that's not what this means. When I say be responsive, and this is important, this gets back to first impressions. Again, someone is looking at your portfolio. They only have about 10 to 15 to 20 seconds before they make a decision. When it comes to being responsive, if they actually look through your portfolio, you've done some of these things, it's free from spelling errors, you've made a great first impression, you provided context, you have a process, you're showing that you're able to think strategically, you show that your client work is used in the real world, you show you're able to solve problems, you have unique value that you've created, you're telling a story, you're doing all those things. And they say, I'm going to reach out to this designer. Is it easy to find your phone number? Is it easy to find your email address? Ask yourself that. Or better yet, find someone who knows nothing about your business or your website and ask them, can you find my phone number on this page? And see how long it takes them to find it. It should be very quick for them to find it. It should even be in the footer of the page, whatever it might be. They should find it very quickly. Now, when the person finally decides to reach out to you, how long does it take for you to respond? This is important. Clients will make a decision on hiring on this, whether you believe it or not. They'll judge how quickly you email them back as a standard of how quickly you'll respond to them when they actually become a paying client. I remember, I'll tell this story. We were working with a company, and this is a story back from one of my older day jobs, but we were working with a company. It was an agency. We emailed them. They took 3 days to get back to us. Now, I think what happened is we weren't an actual client yet, right? We were someone who was evaluating the company to see if we wanted to work with them. So they had a client queue that they responded to very quickly, and they had like a preliminary sales queue that they got to when they could. So if we were a client, they would have responded immediately, but we were in the pre-sales queue. Regardless, they took a while to get back to us, and someone literally said, I don't think we should move forward with this company. They said this in the email and everyone saw it, including the company. They said, I don't think we should move forward with this company because look how long it took for them to respond to us. If this is any indication of their service, we shouldn't use them. Now, I already explained they had a support queue or an existing client queue where they responded to quickly, but they had a pre-sales queue too. Regardless, someone interpreted the response on a reflection of the service that they had to offer. So again, all the 10 things that I mentioned, if they're important and if you apply them to your portfolio, your website, you'll definitely increase your chances of clients hiring you because you're not going to fall victim to any of those common pitfalls. But if they reach out to you and you're slow, shot yourself in the foot. Shot yourself in the foot. And they may move on. But I said a lot today, and everything I said was really just the tip of the iceberg. How do I mean? Because, let's go back, there is a competent way to present your projects. So, in other words, we're talking about the difference between an amateur and a professional, and the main difference is whether it's paid or unpaid, but also how competent you are is a reflection of if people see you as an amateur or professional. If people see you as a professional, they're willing to pay you more, and they're able to adhere to your process more willingly because you are a professional. But that being said, I mentioned a lot, and I spent the last 9 months creating a resource that encapsulates everything that I said so far, right? And that resource is called the Behance Blueprint, right? And it's how you can stand out as a designer and rise to the top above other designers who are in the industry. So everything that we talked about, from how to tell a story to being responsive to what information should you include, how do you pick your target audience, what are the certain elements that need to go in your portfolio that in a sense will be key indicators of how someone hires you. All of that is in the Behance Blueprint. So what is this? Behance Blueprint is a framework which will serve as a guide of the creative elements you should always include in your portfolio projects in order to present your best work. So in other words, it's a framework, it's a guide, but I walk you through how to do it and give you tools on how to do it. And literally, if you place things how they need to go in this framework, it almost in a sense acts as a checklist for all the things we mentioned earlier. And you can ensure that your portfolio project at least looks, if not mimics, how professional agencies display their work on the Behance platform, but also you can take these same elements because there are templates that are offered and export them and put them on your website. So in terms of how that course flows, it has 3 areas, really 4, but 3 areas. We talk about mindset of how to be a professional, and then we get into the actual framework, right? How to prepare your project. Then we get into, once the project is prepared, how do you put that in front of potential clients so they can see what it is that you did, right? So we leave being an amateur, become a professional. We walk through the framework, and then we get to how to get exposure for the things that you created. And then we even get into some case studies and examples. So some other things that you get are video walkthroughs. There's about 25 of them. And I'm very to the point in these videos because I'll say this, some resources and courses online, I think it's amazing that you have 70 videos, but that's a lot. Like, in a sense, get to the point so someone can quickly implement what it is that they've learned. And I've distilled this down to those videos, 25. I plan on adding more, but it's very dense and concise, the videos that I did. It won't take up tons of time. I mean, you can literally finish this in a day. You can go through it, and actually the students that are in the class, I was shocked. They purchased the course and I was expecting them to take a week, and I checked back on them 2 days later, and they already created portfolio projects in the style. I was like, whoa, okay. I thought you were gonna take a week. Okay, you're already done. So you can very quickly turn around professional looking portfolios that have all the elements that they need to go in there. So video walkthrough, there's a checklist on what people look for. So even what we talked about today, there's a quick checklist as a reminder. There's a community where you're not alone. If you have any questions or need support or need me to review anything, I'll review it in the community. Maybe you don't have time to watch these videos. I wrote a guide. So if you're a reader and you just like reading things and taking them in, that's available to you as well. And as I mentioned, there are templates. So really things are just laid out in a template, and all you have to do is utilize those templates and put in your work, and you're like almost done. Just a few tweaks. And I mentioned earlier, you get access to this resource and any future things that I add to it. So it's lifetime access. I'm already creating some videos. Even this weekend, after this live training, I am going to make videos and add them to the course. So you pay once, you get access to that course. Here's an example of some of the things that we discuss in the course. We look at top mistakes, contextual photography. That is such a good lesson. I talk about how to use photography to make your portfolio better, because photography helps set the context of your portfolio project. So we looked at how to write what I called a defining statement, because you needed to provide context. And then we looked at how to write a defining statement. But this video is basically how to do that with pictures, which is an amazing video. No joke. It's my favorite. I learned a lot in making the video, right? And I use that for all of my clients. So we go through these lessons and more, everything from colors and typography to contextual photography, all the way down to how you should actually lay things out and use icons. Amazing lessons, great feedback I'm getting, and I plan to add more. I talked a little bit about the framework here. This is a quick screenshot of the framework I applied to a previous portfolio project that I had. So I made a portfolio project. It was just okay, but I researched by looking at different agencies, calling different people. Like I said, 9 months I spent in researching, and I came up with this framework, applied it to an old project, and people look at it like, "Oh man, this guy knows his branding." And I was like, "Well, I know some about branding. Yeah, I do, but really, I just apply this framework, and clients and agencies respect this very much." And it just changed the way I've positioned myself. So it's been pretty amazing. So as I mentioned, I'm saying all of this not to close the sale. I'm saying all of this to say you can watch everything we talked about earlier, rewatch it. That's why there's a replay. And you can take in everything that we talked about and learn that way. Or you can utilize something that I've created that takes care of that for you. Like I said, in a matter of a day, I saw people turning around amazing things. Now, how much does this cost? Now, people have argued with me on how much this costs, but I don't know if you've noticed this, but it says $295 for the freelancer bundle because I give you multiple courses. I give you the Behance Blueprint, but I also give you the Freelance Jumpstart Masterclass, which has bonus interviews and contracts, client contracts, proposals. It even has how to go about invoicing and getting paid on time. I even have a calculator where I walk you through and I say, this is how you calculate your hourly rate if you're going to charge hourly. So $50 an hour, not good enough. Put your expenses and your income goals, and this will give you a calculated hourly rate you need to charge at minimum to make sure you meet what those goals are. So that calculator is a part of that. Or if you just want the blueprint, it's $165. Now, I don't know if you notice this thing on the bottom. Like you notice this here? I did something crazy. I'm not trying to sound like those car salesmen. I did something crazy. No. Really what ended up happening was I realized that this had tremendous value, but I wanted to give people an opportunity, at least for a couple of weeks, to get the course, because I think it's more important that people know how to incorporate these elements in their portfolio rather than me make a lot of money, right? So that being the case, this is what I did. I have taken $155, or excuse me, it's $155 for the freelancer bundle, or I've taken off $140 of the freelancer bundle, and of the blueprint, I took off $100. I was advised against this. I was told not to do this, but I'm doing this because I know I mentioned earlier how I didn't want to be in the category where people saw me as a hookup, and I didn't want to be in the category of people saying, Nathan, you want a deal or a discount. I'm not looking at it from that lens with this. I'm looking at it from the lens of, I believe if you're watching this, you care about investing in yourself. Therefore, I'm trying to make the investment more accessible for you, and I'm trying to make the investment more available for you. So if you were to sign up after watching this webinar, if you sign up, I made a special link. If you go there, you'll get this at these prices. I think they're too low, personally. And eventually, after a couple weeks, I'll raise the price. And it will never be this price again. I can guarantee that. But regardless, I think it's important that you utilize everything we talked about today in this live training. And if it's hard to memorize, or you're wondering, how do I put that in practically into my portfolio projects, I've done that for you with this framework. And all you have to do is be faithful to apply the advice given and the lessons that were in the course. All you have to do is apply. And if nothing else, you'll be better than majority of designers that are out there who aren't implementing these things. So I'll leave that there for you all to look at. But thank you. Thank you for taking the time to look at this. I mentioned training would be about an hour to a half. We've been streaming for about an hour and 20 minutes. So I did want to leave this open for Q&A. Are there any questions for anyone who is currently live and watching? Even if you're watching on the replay, if you were to go and leave a comment during the replay, I'll rewatch the replay and I'll come back and answer those questions. So even if you don't ask me a question now, I'll go back and look at what those questions are, and I'll make sure to provide answers when I'm looking again on the replay as well. Or I'll even find the people that made the comments and just reach out to them. However I can get the answer to you is perfectly fine with me. So yeah, any questions so far? I mean, this has been what do clients look for when hiring designers? And we walked through a little bit of mentality as well as 10 things. But regardless of those 10 things, any questions? I'm here to answer any number of questions that you may have. And I'll pause for a second. Well, good. Maybe I answered everybody's questions so far. So I'll go back to this just before I end. The Behance Blueprint, right now, if you go to that link, you're saving, I'm crazy, but you're saving up to 40 to 60% right now on this resource. And I've been shocked at the progress. I know I created the course, I know that, but I've been shocked at the progress of the students in the course. I just didn't expect them to do it so quickly, but they did. And it wasn't necessarily that they didn't have the skills to create an amazing portfolio that rivals leading agencies out there. It wasn't that they didn't have the skills. They just needed a playground or a framework to function in. And that's what the framework did for them and really has done for me. So again, I don't see any questions at the moment, but I'll go back and look. Thank you for taking the time to check out this live training. I greatly appreciate it. As I mentioned, if you have any questions at all, I'm here and willing to answer any number of what those questions may be. And yeah, I just look forward to seeing you all. If you make the decision to get in the course, I think that'd be a very smart investment for your future. But I look forward to seeing you there. And even if you don't join the course, reach out to me. Contact me on my website. I mentioned different places to get to my website throughout this training, nathanlote.com. Even if you have a question for me, I tend to take people's questions and I turn it into podcast episodes, right? So I can still provide value for you, whether it's in the course or not. I'm just here because I want to see you become a better designer, and I also want to see you get hired by the potential clients that you're targeting. Well, until the next one, I will catch you later. See ya.